Hello and welcome for joining us here today on Oneness Talk Radio, Light, Laughter, and Lattes. Today, I am your host, Patty Markham Peterson, and I am bringing in a guest, Jordan Boerema. I had her on one other time a couple months ago with her business partner, Farron Peterson. And we talked that time all about the healing effects of art. And today our topic is about the inner critic. Last week, Jerry and I spoke a lot about ego, navigating ego. We gave practices on ways to become more discerning and looking at ourselves to bring ourselves to more love and compassion. And that's what Jordan and I are going to speak about today, is from inner critic to compassion. And compassion is the fifth dimension. Think Dalai Lama. And as we lift there and anchor there, then we can go up into the higher dimensions of seventh and ninth. And the time is perfect for that now. And so as a medical intuitive healer, this is something I see a lot with my clients and, of course, human. I've had to work through much of my own inner critic and still noticing what areas that may come up. And we're going to talk about that. And if you'd like to ask any questions, you can be in the chat. Even though I am pre-recording this, I will be there live to join in the chat. So if there's anything there, please jot it down. So Jordan is a licensed art therapist from the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. And she has had many years, a decade or so of practice work experience. I guess that's the word I'm looking for, in a myriad of areas in therapy and with art therapy and in different settings. And she has facilitated over 3,000 groups, helping these groups with skills in art therapy. And we're going to talk more about that and how you can join too. I've joined in on some of these art groups and they're amazing, wonderfully healing and insightful. She specializes in supporting young adults and adults, especially with depression and anxiety and past traumas. And there is a lot of that in the world. And I know I also, as a medical intuitive healer, transformational life coach, do see quite a bit of that. And I'm always encouraged when people are starting to do more of their healing journey when they're younger. And so Jordan takes all these different skills and brings them forward for individuals and in groups. So I'd like to have Jordan start sharing a little bit about what this theme, why we're talking about this theme.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for that warm welcome. So we are talking about inner critic, moving to self-compassion. It's something that I probably talk to with every single one of my clients. It's something, we're human, we have that inner critic, it's tied to our ego, right? We really try to first normalize that our inner critic, it's there as a protective factor and to not judge it and to notice it. Yeah. So just because I think sometimes like we'll notice our inner critic, then we start judging it. Why am I engaging with this? But it's really like, I really like to just like pause and say like, there's a protective factor to it and it's actually not helpful, but there's a reason we engage in the behavior.
Right. And I like that because in my spiritual work, that's so key, is that we stop and we're going, oh, I'm aware.
Mm-hmm.
And stop the judging because you're judging or inner criticking.
Don't judge the judging.
Yes, exactly. And then going, wait, there's something underneath. It is being protective. So share a little more about that.
Yeah, so I think people, when people start recognizing the inner critic, and we can get into this a little bit later, we do a lot of exploring with the arts. It's really nice to externalize it, make it something that's not like who I am itself, right? It might be more part of this ego or something that's separate. And once people start becoming aware of like how cruel they're being to themselves, I think then that almost causes more judgment, like, well, why am I like this? So I think it's helpful to say like, hey, like, there's a reason you were navigating life this way. You thought like, if I'm just hard enough on myself, if I just beat myself up enough, or if I judge myself before someone else judges me, like I can protect myself, I can make myself better, I won't make that mistake again, right? But really what we're doing is actually making things worse.
Fueling it, right?
Yeah, we're actually fueling shame, we're fueling
Yes.
depression, we're fueling anxiety. I always say, think of a little child. If you talk to a little child that way, like, you're not good enough, you suck, you're not smart. Are they going to thrive, or are they going to not? And everyone's like, they're not going to. I'm like, exactly. So you're doing the same thing to yourself. So we start by really just like building the awareness. I also bring in like the brain, what we're doing to the brain too, because I think especially adults like to know like physically, biologically what's going on. So
yes, feed our left brain by telling us about it. Okay.
Yeah, they almost have a little more buy-in to like why they maybe should, I don't even want to say the word should, because that actually ties into the inner critic, but maybe why they want to navigate life differently, maybe why they want to treat themselves differently. Because essentially, when we're engaging in the inner critic, that self-critical voice, like part of the ego, we are not only the attacker, we're the attackee. So we're like attacking ourselves. And so when we know when we're being attacked, our brain shifts into that fight, flight, freeze mode, the anxiety brain. So A, it's really hard to be present. B, we're lighting up this part of our brain that's only helpful when we're in actual danger. So if there's a lion coming at me, I want that part of my brain to activate, and I want to be able to run away. I want my adrenaline going. I want my cortisol going. But when we're essentially just beating ourselves up in our head, it's not helpful. It's really not helpful to have that adrenaline going. It's not helpful to have those stress hormones going. So
right. So what does that do in the long term, right? Because so many people that I witnessed, and I was there too, we're operating on that adrenaline and cortisol so long, we don't even know that that's what we're doing.
Exactly.
And
that feels like your baseline, your norm. Yeah.
Right. Till you really start bringing in more balance, and then you can start getting some clarity. But what I'm wondering is, if that is fueling that, that part, that fight, flight, freeze part of the brain, and we're using that all the time when there isn't the proverbial tiger, so to speak.
Yeah.
Does it deplete? What do you see? And then I'll share what I see as a medical intuitive.
Well, I definitely see it really fuels, like I said earlier, it really fuels that shame. It really fuels the depression. It really fuels that anxiety. So you essentially just get stuck in that cycle. And I always tell people, it's like when you're driving a car and your wheel gets stuck in the mud and you're like, if I just push on the gas harder, it'll like get me out. But really you're making that groove deeper. That's essentially what you're doing. And you're making those grooves in your brain deeper too. So those pathways keep getting deeper and deeper. So it's harder to get out. Those thoughts want to go to the pathway of least resistance. So a lot of my work too is, how do we shift to making new pathways in our brain? And it takes a lot of intention and energy, and art making can be really helpful to start that.
Yes. We're going to go toward that more too in a minute. That makes sense, that those grooves within the brain, those those pathways get deeper and more in that habitual pattern.
Yeah.
And what I know, from the holistic healer that I am too, is when we're running on that cortisol and that adrenaline all the time, our adrenals are getting drained.
Yeah.
And, we're not only that, we literally can fry our brain. It's like, it's creating all these health issues, not only on our mental, emotional body, we're feeling the anxiety and, but then on that physical. And I ended up one time some years ago, ending up with such depleted adrenals after so much that go, and not good enough. So I have to, or, whatever is on. And it took quite a bit to rebuild those adrenals. And the biggest part of that was me slowing down and doing meditation and some fun and huge amounts of self-love and compassion.
Yes. Yeah, that's so right. It's like, and too, it's like, more about where things vibrate, but right, if we're fueling these cycles and we're stuck in anxiety, depression, shame, we're vibrating at such a lower level. So if we're trying to make ourselves a better person, like we think, okay, if I just beat myself up enough, how do we actually get there when we're actually keeping ourselves stuck at those lower levels of vibrations?
Yeah. Do you use in your therapy with people the victim triangle?
Yeah.
Yes. Because when you're saying, we're like, be the abuser and being abused, I mean, the victim, the abuser, we're doing all of that in there.
Yeah, we're kind of stuck in a triangle too. Yeah.
Yes. And then what way is, that rescuer coming in? Sometimes it's self-medicating or,
eating or
yes.
Yeah, any kind of avoidance.
Yes. Yeah. And so sometimes we use different languaging, and there's the similarities, and this is what I see between a lot of healers and therapists, so for each client, the words they hear might resonate more with one of those different terms than the other terms.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I feel like so much of it overlaps with some things stick with some people versus others. And that's why I love the art making too, because they essentially come up with the image or the metaphor or what works for them. So I feel like that's really helpful when it comes to the art making around this topic.
And so do you do a specific group for this Exploring the Inner Critic? Yes.
Yeah. When I was working more at a hospital setting, I would have like a group on just one day on that topic. So it'd be like explore your inner critic. And so some people are like, what does that look like? I'm like, well, you can externalize it, you can personify it, you can make it abstract, just like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? And do it in some sort of visual art piece. Okay. And then I would have people, after they made the art, have a conversation with it. And it was so interesting what would come up in those conversations, because it would be like, people, like emotions would come up, because people would start recognizing, wow, like now that it's not just up here in my head and I'm saying it out loud, my brain is processing it like someone else is saying this to me. And they would get super emotional, because it's like, oh my gosh, why am I so cruel to myself? Why am I so mean to myself? And some people get empowered and be like F off inner critic, like I'm not listening to you anymore. Or some people be like, hey, like have compassion for it, like, hey, I know you're trying to protect me, but this is actually not helpful. It was just so beautiful to see like different
deeper awareness, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so what a beautiful gift through art for somebody to be able to, we call it even like take off the blinders.
Yes.
So often we have denial around so many different areas. And
sometimes you don't know it when you're in it. So I think like diffusing, like one of the skills we talk about is diffusing. So like, here's the inner critic, here's you. And we often get like fused to it. So we feel like this is me, this is who I am. Like I can't operate any other way. So like art is one way to help us kind of diffuse from it. So now I can see it from like out here and not be like in it. So Farron and I, who is also your daughter and who is my business partner, we do run now an 8-week group on this, because we just see how important this work is. And like one group is so powerful that like, we're like, we need to
do the repetitive gathering together. And that's when I see people get more comfortable and feel a little more safe in order to look at those layers underneath, right?
Exactly. And then have more time. So we have the awareness piece at the beginning where we explore more of the inner critic the first few weeks. And then we move into self-compassion and we break it down each week of like, what does this look like? Because as you know, as a healer, a lot of these words are just like buzzwords thrown around. And so we really dig deep at like, what does this look like? And we help you apply it like in the moment, which is really nice.
Beautiful. Because whenever we have an old pattern, habits, it takes consistent, and I don't even think the word work, but consistent attention.
Yep.
And looking at it and choice. What am I going to do to unwind? And so that doing 8 weeks sounds fantastic. How soon or when is your next group for that?
We haven't set like a date yet, like actual day and time, but we're planning on starting it after Labor Day. So we're hoping once people are kind of back from summer break and all that, like we'll have availability for a nighttime group and a daytime group. So
and these are virtual, so people can join from all around the world. Correct?
Virtual, So
I highly, highly recommend to anybody that goes, wow, that's out of my comfort zone, doing something so different as an art group around looking at my own inner critic, my own patterns around self-judgment, whatever that all can be, right? Consider, joining Jordan and Farron in that group. And the one way you can reach them is, they're very, very active on Instagram.
So we're the.sisu.space. So the SISU Space.
SISU.
SISU, yeah.
We talked about in our last chat how that is reminiscent of both of their heritage in the Finnish heritage.
Yeah.
And the SISU, so the SISU Space. And if you type that in the search, you'll find them, or the website. And yes. So can you share a little bit, how did this come to be? I mean, is this because were you noticing in your life more around this area, or how did you? Yes.
So, I mean, yes, I have an inner critic. I think I've worked really hard to be kind to myself. I think mine shows up more subtly. So I have to be a little more in tune with when I'm beating myself up, but I've already, I feel like, done a lot of work around this. I would say when I was working in the hospital setting, we did a group on shame, and I just noticed how many of my clients were just so stuck there, and it stemmed from those inner critic thoughts. And then we also did this group on self-compassion, and we talked about how self-compassion really helps us move from a place of our inner critic into a place of self-love, kindness, compassion, being present, being mindful. So I was like, wow, this would be a great group to explore through the art, right? Explore your inner critic, have a conversation with it. And then I started building on that. Okay, can I come back? We would take our art. Can I come back from the inner critic? Can I hold my inner critic differently? Can I actually send some self-compassion to my inner critic? Can I take what I made and turn it into something else? I have all this energy. Can I actually shift it into something else? And then we really talked about the self-compassion piece, and we would make art about self-compassion, then write a letter to ourselves in a, self-compassionate tone. And it was just so powerful. And I did this group so many times, and I'm getting goosebumps right now. Like every single time there was just such powerful shifts and so many emotions being released, and just really healing. So it's one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Beautiful. I love hearing that. Because some of the roots, right? Let's talk about like the roots of this inner critic. Why is it that this is quite universal, pervasive? What are yours? And then I'll share where I come from.
My inner critic was never really strong from like external forces. I was really lucky to grow up in a household where I was accepted for who I was. I wanted to be an artist. That's kind of, I just feel like that's not the like, oh, you're not a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, but I was very like encouraged to go on that path. I think my inner critic comes from a place actually of being a healer. Like, am I doing enough? Am I helping enough? Am I, that enough? And so I think a lot of my work has been more around that, and also giving myself permission to take care of myself, because sometimes I feel quote unquote selfish, like, oh, I'm putting myself first.
Especially as a parent, right? I mean, look at all the societal around being a mother, and then you've got your work, your service there, and then you have a partner, and
exactly. I will put myself last, so I'm really working on trying to put myself first in a balanced way. And so I think actually my inner critic probably popped up more when I became a therapist and a mother versus like the first part of my life. I'm sure it was there. It's all,
we all do. Yep.
Yeah. But I just think it's gotten louder. So I think for me, that's where my roots right now are stemming from, is like, it's okay to take care of myself. It's okay if I'm not a perfect mom. It's okay if I'm not a perfect parent.
And what is perfect anyway? I've seen perfect.
Yeah.
Insanity.
Yes. Right. Because my definition of perfect is probably different than yours. So like it's never going to get you anywhere.
And then how about with the clients that you work with, have you seen certain themes show up with those that have?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think a lot can be from things they've internalized from external experiences, whether it's societal norms, whether it's, upbringing. If they, I have some clients that have, traumatic upbringings where like, they were never good enough for their parents. And so that was very internalized. I see a lot of things. Religion for sure.
Because if things are black and white, right and wrong, and then you feel differently, then
there's something wrong with you. Exactly. Yeah.
And what we call those life scripts that when we all came in, where everything's provided for us in the womb. And then you come out and we're dependent on, our needs being met outside of us, parents, caregivers, whatever. And so we start looking outside of us for everything. And, in the spiritual realm, we came into forgiveness to remember, who we are. And with that, then, if, something wasn't provided, we think there is something wrong with me if we didn't get that piece. And almost everybody in the classes I've been involved in as a participant, as a healer, all say, I could have used more love,
Yeah. Or feeling like you were enough, right? Yes. Like I'm enough. Like, even though I didn't make the basketball team or didn't get the best grades, like I'm still enough. And I think so much pressure in our society, especially our society specifically.
Very much here in America, as you may see themes or tendencies. Yes. So that most of us, develop some form of there's something wrong with me or I'm not good enough, right? There's other ones, I did something wrong. There's I don't fit in. I deserve to be punished is another one. And there can even be, I see overlays of these from past lives that are refractions that need to be healed, even around the punishment one. And yet it's, most of us have pieces of this, and, yours wasn't very strong then, but as we come into another chapter in our life, that's when these may come up. Yeah. I spiraled out from, and I shared last week a little more, was at a time where I had gotten huge amount of higher energy after a trip to India. However, what was underneath were these areas to be looked at in a deeper, thorough, compassionate way, where I still had issues around how hard I was being on myself, and my body was freaking, and the new energies on how do I integrate. Yeah. And, going right away, even if you have a symptom into there's something wrong with me, when maybe
really you're healing. The symptom means you're healing, right?
Right. Yes. Let's sit with this. Let's be with it, and so when you talk about removing yourself from, doing the art and removing in our work with Self-Ascension, it's, become the witness, right? And then we even become the witness of the witness and these other dimensions. And we can, whenever I do that, how much more compassion comes for who we, the human part in this form, in this body, that, oh my gosh, look what all we've navigated. And in today's world, there's a lot going on.
A lot,
Right?
Yeah.
So the life scripts we see pretty universal, and yet, like you say, some people, those grooves may be a lot deeper if they've suffered traumas, and big challenges. And so what a testament is when we get to that point to say, okay, I'm ready to really look. I'm ready to reach out and have some support and help. And, that's such a beautiful, beautiful time then when somebody's ready to do that.
Yeah, and I really try, like, one of my first things to really spell out when we're doing this work is, this isn't, I know America loves a quick fix, right? A quick fix for any pain. This is not a quick fix. Like, this is about sitting with discomfort. This is about looking at how we've been navigating the world in a non-judgmental way and starting to build those new pathways in our brain by being compassionate towards ourselves. And it's not going to happen overnight. So you're going to learn this skill, and it's going to take practice and intention before it becomes that habit or secondhand nature of how I navigate things. And so I think that can be frustrating to people, which understandably so. And I think it's really important to stick with it. Notice when you're getting pulled back into your inner critic, not judge it, pull yourself back into self-compassion and have a dance with it, right? And not judge the process, because it is a process. And even our 8-week group, there's still going to be work to do after the 8-week
Absolutely.
group. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, beautiful. Because I have to tell clients that all the time too. We're not just giving a pill, to snuff something out, which we all kind of want. The brain too probably just wants the quick, easy way.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. You're uncomfortable. You don't want to be uncomfortable. So
right. Yes. To be able to sit with that. And that's where that little bit of lifting and, witnessing and or distancing with that artwork. I love hearing how people responded when they created out here like this.
Yeah. And it's coming from them, right? It's not coming from me. I'm not telling them like, hey, draw your inner critic like this, right? It's like, this is coming from you. Like you have the power to do this. You have the information inside of you to do this. So I just love being there to facilitate it, because it also takes the power dynamic away from me and my clients, which I think is really important.
That's a really good point. The more that people start to recognize it is all within us. It is all of our healing deep within, and we can bring that forward.
And you're capable. And I think that's a really nice place too to move into the compassion piece, right? Because I think a lot of people don't feel like they're capable. And as they move through this art process, they start realizing they do have more insight, they do have more awareness, they do have tools to work with, and they are capable, and they have gotten themselves through really hard times. And maybe those tools aren't working anymore. So it's time to shift what we're doing.
Upgrade our tools sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's such a key point is, many of us didn't get a lot of reaffirmation for our positive, for our goodness. And that's what fuels our self-worth.
Yep.
Right. And so when they start seeing some success, it's like celebrate. Yes. Even an insight,
Yes.
Yeah. And that reaffirmation. Wow, I do have,
I got this. Yeah.
And do you see them being in a group setting, that if some things are shared, that we do learn from each other too?
Oh yeah.
Right?
I am like, there's nothing wrong with individual therapy. I see individual clients all the time, and it's helpful, it's healing, but there is something about group that is like, there's so much healing going on in those circles. It's so like, people don't feel alone, which is when we get into self-compassion piece, that's a huge part of self-compassion, is not feeling alone in your struggles. Because I think the whole what's wrong with me, oh my gosh, someone else thinks the same way I do, or someone else has been through what I went through. So there's not something wrong with me. Something happened to me, right? It's not about like me as a person, like I'm wrong. It's like something happened to me, and this is how I navigated it. And now I'm seeing other people that have also been through. And obviously everyone's experience is unique, but I think it's helpful to be like, oh, I'm not the only, I've had so many clients be like, I thought I was crazy. I thought I was the only one that went through something like this. And the second they just hear someone else, it's almost like this weight is lifted off their shoulders. So to me, that's so powerful to see.
I love hearing that, because that has been my experience also on both sides of that. Yeah. When I one incident that comes to my mind was when I was deep in grief years back, and I knew I needed to go to grief support groups.
Yes.
I just needed, I was so called there. And it was so helpful then to start hearing others, because you really do think you're crazy. When you're going through deep grief, you are truly believing you've lost it. And to hear others say the same things, that what they're feeling, from the anger to the believing they're going to walk back into your life, to whatever, the one that's deceased. So, and then I see too, on an energetic spiritual, that it's like, who is meant to be there will be there, right? I mean, we're drawn by an energy. Even your clients find you by your energy, mine do by mine, right? And that group that comes together, there's a synergy there, right? There's that sort of, each one is placed there for a reason.
Oh, for sure. And
we are all teachers and students all the time. And, they've even done a study, and I wish I could quote who I learned this from. I have a sense, but it might not be right. Anyway, where when he went to do his big lectures, talks, and he would start checking in and asking people to say, who here, was here after, losing a loved one. And right next to that, people would often have the same issue right next.
That's so interesting.
Yes. And so, there's that whole energy thing, and trust,
totally.
Doing that deeper then into trust and surrender, and that this is exactly where I'm at this moment. And so do you use those words, and how does that come up in some of your work? The trust, the surrender?
Yeah. We do a lot of work around mindfulness, especially off the work of John Kabat-Zinn, and one of his attitudes. He has 7, well now 9 attitudes of mindfulness, and one of his attitudes is trust. So like trusting, like you said, trusting the process, trusting the experience. He really talks about trusting the body. Like your body breathes, right? Yes. Like you don't have to think about that. You just trust that, right? You trust that your food's digesting. You trust that, you can keep going. And so we can apply that to our everyday life, like, right, trusting that I'm in this group at the right time, at the right moment. I saw people say, like, I wish I did this years ago. And I'm like, you need to trust that this is when this was your time to be here in this group right now. Yeah. Surrender. We talk a lot about surrender and in the aspect of like letting go. So like, what can I let go of, right? Like, what am I holding on so tightly to that's not helping me, right? Can I let go of that?
Yes.
Right.
It's often an issue behind some of the anxiety and things, right?
Yeah. Cause it's like letting go of control essentially. So what we're trying to do, right, especially the inner critic, is like holding on to this control when really it's keeping us stuck. So it's like, what can I actually let go of that's going to be helpful for me? So a lot of times it is the inner critic, right? Can I let go of these thoughts? Does this inner critic have to be driving the bus, or can I drive the bus, right? I'm not good enough, so I'm not going to try to put myself out there, right? No one's going to love me, so I'm not going to try to go find a partner, right? So can I let go of these thoughts to open up more doors to live in a more compassionate way?
Beautiful. Yes. And several of those pieces, as the medical intuitive, I relate to chakras.
Yes.
And it's the solar plexus is our 3rd chakra. This is all about trust, and this is where we hold control. And I know from my past experience, that's right where I would feel when I was feeling anxious, and so there's different energy centers as you then go into more of that. What can I let go of? Releasing any control. You're bringing more balanced energy into that chakra, which helps the whole system.
Yeah, you're making more space, right? Like, so much more space to let other things come in.
Exactly. Yes. So that, if there's somebody, struggling with some of these themes that we're talking about, there are different avenues to get the support, to find, the ones with you to help you bring this forward, the positive, compassionate, self-acceptance, love forward, and letting those old patterns simmer, so through our work as medical intuitives, or Jordan's as art therapists, there's so many different ways that people, and I love when people combine several different healers at a time. Right. And I know when I've gone through some dark times, that's what I did, from meditation groups, and there too, going into a group, so much more powerful than if I sat home alone, because then, not only is there that compounded energy, but that aloneness, that connection is so important.
So important.
And so, I chose several different support systems at that time to help me to lift up and out. And so anything else you wanted to share about that?
Not specifically, but maybe we could talk more about, I know we talked a lot about the inner critic, and I know a lot of us are very familiar with that. So maybe talk more about, okay, so what do I do instead, right? Like the self-compassion piece. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about like what that looks like. Because like I said, I think it's a word that's thrown out a lot. I think a lot of when my clients first heard, like, we're hearing like, this is what, we need to shift to. It sounds a little fluffy and like, okay, how is this going to help me?
Yes, please give some more concretes around that.
So I think just talking about like what it's not and what it is, and again, why we would switch to self-compassion and what it's doing to the brain, I think it'd be really helpful. And I'm not taking credit for all this research. It's a lot of the self-compassion work I do is based off of Kristen Neff. So if people are interested in this, she has a website, she has a book now that just came out that I'm ordering and going to read, because she's done so much research on self-compassion. The other one is Tara Brach too. She's like, Tara Brach. Yeah, she does a lot.
I've done some of her YouTube meditations. And especially for me, when I was in anxious period and had panic attacks. She's very soothing.
Yes, her voice is very
yeah. Soothing. Tara Brock. And then the other one,
Kristen Neff.
Neff, N-E-F-F?
N-E-F-F. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if you Google it, they'll pop up right away.
Right, right. 2 resources. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So self-compassion, if we're going to talk about off of like Kristen Neff's work, I think hers is a little just more straightforward. I love Tara Brock's, but hers goes into a little more, it's a little more complicated the way she talks about it, but essentially they overlap and they're the same. So Kristen Neff talks about the inner critic and moving towards compassion, and she's done research about this with the whole mammalian caregiving system, which I think this is so fascinating, especially now that I've had children, is when a child is born, right, they're dependent on the caregiver. So if the caregiver treated the child in the way of like the inner critic, right, that child wouldn't thrive. And so their stress response would not be developed, it would be problematic, right? Like they wouldn't know how to soothe themselves. So when we move into self-compassion, we are actually moving into that part of our brain, the mammalian caregiving system, which releases like oxytocin, the happy love hormones, right? We're getting out of that anxiety brain.
Yep.
So if we can shift into that, we're doing so much already just for like our biology, our physical bodies. So I always tell my clients, like, think about, like, what would a healthy attachment, healthy caregiver do for a baby that's crying, right? They wouldn't be like yelling at the baby, why are you crying? You're so stupid. Like, stop crying. Like, we wouldn't do that, right? Our like innate nature is to be like, you know, like that's why moms and caregivers sing to babies a lot with like a gentle, soothing voice, the rocking, you know, the touch, all that. And so essentially, this is what we want to do for ourselves. And there's different ways we can do that. So I just found that like really fascinating. And that's another reason why I love self-compassion, because like we're literally shifting our brain like from anxiety mode to this mammalian caregiving system. So that's the first part.
I love it.
Yeah.
It goes right with, you know, our energy bodies. Our outermost energy body is spiritual. And
Yes.
we have our mental energy body inside with all our beliefs, and most of them are subconscious, then the emotional body, then the physical. And that's showing to me.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you shift
here on the move out, yeah.
Yep, it changes right on the physical.
Yeah.
And that's that helps people to wrap their brains around it a little more when so there's 3 components to it, but before I talk about this, what it's not, I think people get confused. Like, I think it's not the self-pity and it's not the self-indulgence. It's like right in the middle. It's neither. Like, so I'm not sitting here having a pity party for myself. We've all done it. I've done it. So there's no judgment around it. Right, exactly. But there's when our victim is popping up. We just go, okay, there's that part. Yeah.
There's the victim. I'm going to try to come out of this triangle. So we're not sitting there having a pity party, like, what's wrong with me? Why these things always happen to me? Like, woe is me. We all know when we're in that. And then it's also not the self-indulgence. I think sometimes like, oh my God, I had such a bad day. I'm just going to sit on the couch, watch Netflix all night, eat a whole carton of ice cream. Like, that's also not good for us. So we don't want to go and like overindulge. I think it's okay if we want to take a break, watch a show, have maybe scoop ice cream. Like, that's fine. But like, not overindulgence, which get into
where we don't want to feel, and then we call it, you know, totally distract and deny and just to keep on.
Yeah, but I think people sometimes mistake that for self-compassion.
So self-compassion
is really like acknowledging where we're at, sitting with that discomfort or sitting with whatever's coming up for us, and then doing what's most effective for us in that moment, which maybe is not always the easiest thing. The easy thing might be to sit on the couch and watch Netflix all night. So there's ways we can engage in this, and she has 3 different pillars, and one is self-kindness, another one's common humanity, which we touched upon a little bit with being in a group, and then there's the mindfulness piece. So essentially, you know, in a nutshell, saying as much as I allow myself to be in the present moment, I'm being kind to myself, right? Because if I'm in the present moment, I can identify what's going on for me, and then I can move forward effectively. But if I'm not present with what's coming up, how do I change anything? How do I work through anything? So essentially those are the 3 ways. I would say for self-kindness, like just a way to I have my clients start thinking about it is like, what would you say to your best friend or loved one who is struggling with the same thing you're struggling with?
Yes.
Would you tell them you're not good enough, you suck, you're lazy, you're a failure? And they're like, no, I would never say that. I'm like, okay, so then let's not say that to ourselves. So like I have them start kind of thinking about themselves as their best friend, because I think that's an easier way for them to shift gears and think about it differently. And then I also talk about another way is like self-care and just like basic needs, like, have I slept adequately? Have I eaten balanced and healthy?
How am I nourishing myself? Yes.
Yeah, how am I nourishing? Have I gotten any movement today? Like, have I showered? Just these like basics. I think sometimes people think they have to go above and beyond. I'm like, it can just be something so basic. Maybe you're having a bad day and you're like, oh my God, I haven't even eaten anything today. Let me sit down and have like some fruit or like, any kind of thing to nourish our bodies. So yeah, the self-care and like, how would I talk to a loved one? I think those are like two main parts of that self-kindness piece. It doesn't have to be these grand gestures.
True. And I see that, especially if we've had old patterns and habits in perfectionism, right?
Yep.
They think I have to do everything right or it doesn't pay for me to start.
Yep.
I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And you're a mother of a couple of young children, and I was a single mother for many years. And those early years, sometimes, it's a few minutes here and there, right?
Yes.
To help self-care, self-nurture. I used to, say, even every time I sit on the toilet, hands to heart, deep conscious breaths, be present, have cues, what, how can you tie, something together that you're doing all the time? Go, now I'm going to just be more present every time I sit on the toilet.
Unless your kids are running in.
I used to put a note on the door when I could, please, just a few minutes for a bath, right?
Yeah, I know, right?
Unless the house is burning, do not knock.
Yeah. But that's so true. It's like you can find these little moments where you can, like you said, just even one mindful breath that could tell you, oh my gosh, I'm, not breathing deep right now. I need to slow down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A moment to stretch and drink a glass of water, just to start catching when we might be running in that adrenaline.
Yeah.
Mind got to do or.
Yeah. And then again, the common humanity one, again, if you're not a part of a group, that's okay. You can still engage in this, whether it's like, you could read a book or listen to a podcast that talks about something that maybe like, oh, okay, I went through that, or, or it's even just telling yourself like, I'm not alone. If I'm human, I'm going to experience pain and I'm going to be imperfect and I'm going to be flawed. So if that's true as being a human, which it is, why am I beating myself up for not being perfect or for experiencing pain or telling myself there's something wrong with me? So it's just a nice reminder to be like, we're actually more alike than different. Yes, each of our experiences is unique, but we're all human, we're all flawed, we all experience pain. So I think that's just a nice reminder.
Absolutely. Yes. And sometimes getting out of our own, by perhaps going and volunteering somewhere or helping somebody less fortunate, right?
Yeah, totally. Kind of bring things in perspective too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know I've seen that work really well too.
Yeah.
Those are
still validating your pain. I think I've seen it work really well. And then I see clients be like, well, now I'm judging myself for complaining about my situation when this, and it's like, you still can validate your emotions and your pain and your experience. And it can also help you bring in some gratitude for what you have.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. And recognize you have gifts, skills, and talents to share, whatever that is. And maybe it's through the work or whatever, just connecting more with that aspect. And again, this relates to the solar plexus. That's about, and so many of us have digestive issues and, there's the pancreas, and there's a spleen with our immune system. There's so much in this third chakra below, right in the middle of our belly.
Yeah.
And that is all about, on the emotional level are claiming our gifts, skills, and talents in service.
Yes.
So I'm always looking at ways to bring more energy into our chakra system, so we can live more from our heart. And then that's what opens up is that whole divine galactic blueprint above us as we do that, as we heal those lower three chakras.
And like the inner critic tries to hold us back from doing those things if I'm not going to be perfect at it or good enough. So then you're totally blocking that. So if you can move to that compassionate lens, like how much you're opening up, right? Bringing forward, like you said, those gifts and talents, and then being able to open up to more. And I think that's a really big piece of challenging that inner critic, because it's going to keep you from doing those. And I think art is so helpful because so many adults are like, well, I'm not good at this. And I was like, well, you don't have to be good at this. It's fine.
No,
It's not,
it is so good at stretching us outside our comfort zones. I loved it.
Yeah, and I tell them, I'm like, when you were younger, you didn't say like, oh, I'm not good at art, I'm not going to pick up a crayon, like,
or dancing, or anything,
or dancing or singing, like you did it because you enjoyed it.
You enjoyed it. You enjoy. Yes.
Yeah. So I told them, I'm like, if you can show up here, challenge that inner critic, that perfectionism, or that idea that you have to be good at something to do it, which what is good at art? That's another thing. Then what else can you apply this to in your life, right? What, you enjoy dancing? Go dance. I don't care if you're good at it or not good at it or talented at it, right? So I think art too also helps open up that door and those possibilities of like, oh, well, I just did art and I enjoyed that. What else could I do that maybe I'm holding back from? And that's compassionate, right? Allowing yourself to do these things that bring you joy, or help you build mastery, or help you, I don't know, build some competency.
Absolutely. And anytime we step out of comfort zones, we are having some growth.
Yeah. And that's compassionate.
Yes, it is. I can say from joining in the art groups, it's something I've always tinkered with and loved when I was younger. And then, get away from it as raising children and have a career and everything. And then to see my children embrace it so much.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And,
a lot of artists in your family.
Yes. And so, and they just seem to so easily, effortlessly. So I really was hard on myself when I would try. And, so it was so perfect to go there and to listen, to somebody like a facilitator, and just let go and just see what's there. And I was amazed at what came back, no matter, how anybody else would look at it, but what then I could see from it and what I reflected back. It was so amazing. I just encourage everybody to join in those.
Yeah. Yeah. And what kind of brings us in the mindfulness piece, I don't know how much time we have left, but essentially
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Essentially, I'll just say mindfulness can go in so many different ways. We also have an 8-week group on mindfulness off of John Kabat-Zinn's work, but you can learn mindfulness in other ways too. Essentially, it's about being in the present moment, even if it's uncomfortable, right? So bringing yourself back to the present moment with, this is really important, a non-judgmental stance, right? So if I'm in the present moment and I'm having my inner critics kind of coming into gear, I'm having emotions that I want to judge, the goal is to just be like, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, and it's okay. What can I do in this moment to help me move through it, right? So just really being present in your life. Obviously, art's a great way to do that. You have something tangible in front of you. You have something to judge. So it's a nice way to practice not judging. So I find art is like a very, very great mindfulness practice in noticing those things. You have something tangible to bring your attention back to, and you have something to judge. So it helps you practice that non-judging. Like, oh, I'm judging. I'm just going to come back to the marks I'm making on my page. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Because that, mindfulness term is used a lot. And I think some people may not really understand what that entails.
Yeah.
And, so that's beautiful. What is bringing us to this moment, to be present.
And you can pick an anchor, right? It could be your art, it can be your breath, it can be the pain you have in your belly, and being mindful of it is just noticing it, right? It's not attaching to it. It's not pushing it away. Just like allowing it to be.
Exactly. And I do this practice with a lot of my clients, and it is an expanded body presence practice. And we do that. You witness it, you get the messages. It's so healing. And we sit in that pain, even if you're feeling pain or whatever's there, you sit in it. And witness, you say out loud, oh, it's this color, it's this shape. And you just, oh, look, no judgment. No, it doesn't have to be. And and it's amazing how everybody says it softened, it lessened.
Yeah. And if it's telling you something, right? So if we're trying to not heal it or push it away. It's going to probably come much stronger, be like, hey, I'm trying to tell you something.
Exactly. So instead of I'm wrong, there's something wrong with my body, it's something is calling for more attention. That's all.
Yeah.
More love.
What a kind way to talk to yourself, right?
That's it. Yeah. So that is a very common theme how you're working, and we with our Avesa Medical Intuitive help clients too. No matter what the symptom, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, it's those same principles that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And so as we close, anything else that's coming to mind? We've got a few minutes, and then we can do a little breathing just with that.
Nothing huge is coming to mind. I think we touched on a lot of the main points, but again, I think it all comes back to just like, be curious, like look at yourself as like an investigator and just be curious about what's going on. I think
that's the healthy inner child.
The healthy inner child. And like I said, if you want to explore it deeper, Farron and I are doing more groups on this. There's a lot of information on the web, the internet that you can. And
I'll put the links below this, and they'll be with this, so you can follow the links to contact Jordan and Farron about their groups or individual work. And my links will be here too. If anybody is curious and just has a question or interested, I also do different groups periodically, and individual consultations, no matter where you live, via Zoom or in person here in the summer in Houghton, Michigan, here in the beautiful Keweenaw. So as we close, Jordan, just guide us into that breath work of.
So a lot of times at the end of our groups, when we're exploring these topics, I just have people ground into the floor. So if you're sitting, both feet, you can place your hand on your heart if you want, close your eyes if you feel comfortable, or have a soft gaze. And I really like to keep this theme going. So breathing in compassion through your nose. So we're taking 3 deep belly breaths. So breathing in compassion through your nose, breathing out criticism through your mouth. And so on your own time, you can take in those 3 deep belly breaths.
I hope people notice with that specific intention, my shoulders dropped even more, things softened, and energy flowed as we held an intention to be present to ourselves with mindful self-compassion. And thank you, Jordan, for being here on Light, Laughter, and Lattes. Thank you, everybody catching this in the archives. In this moment, it's airing live on Wednesday.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful honor. Namaste, everybody.